are indicators of software delivery performance, and what are architectural outcomes that enable those things to work well. So for me, what I see when I see measures and I see these highlighted words, I say those are things that we should be talking about doing OKRs about, right? So deploy frequency, like how often are changes made to production for a service? That's also related to lead time. Like this question of how long does it take to get from a commit to source control to having that change running in production is also a key measure of how well you are doing in software delivery performance. We are not doing that well on that measure. That's okay though. Indicators these are practices or technologies that are strongly correlated or support the measures that are in the previous slide. So we have like important things here, like, well, they're all important, but shift left on security is important. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Systems architecture, that's the next slide. My notes are helping. Right, so use version control for everything, including configuration, not just code, bunch of stuff. If we do these things, we'll get sort of better at it. And I have the details and a proposal for how you implement those things, but that turned into something that is not readily digestible via PowerPoint, so I have a linked document if you want to read what I said. And for this one, I want you to take a minute and read these questions and see how many of them you on your team can answer yes to. So there's two parts of this. One, it's a rubric that says, hey, just how are we doing from like, are things decoupled enough for us to be able to achieve high levels of software delivery performance? And the second is, just by the way that they are phrased, they're trying to get you to answer yes. So by that token, there are at least some organizations out there that work in that way, where the answer is supposed to be yes, or is yes. So for me, when I look at those, the answer is pretty much no. And we can go to like why that is, but that's not really the point. The point is, can we make incremental progress? Because we haven't framed things in such a way to encourage those behaviors. So we're at section 3. What can we do about this? So I started saying, like, tools are not the goal, tools help achieve the goal, but you can still, another measure of how mature we are in adopting DevOps principles is what are we actually doing compared to the industry. So this is a graph of a bunch of, well, it's really sort of a mixed bag here. Some of them are software things, some of them are tools, some of them are concepts, some of them are practices. But it's basically saying, here's sort of the state of adopters of DevOps technologies across the field. Over here in late majority, which is another way of saying pretty much everyone, you should be doing continuous integration testing, you should have infrastructure as code in practice, you should be using containers because those aren't terribly exciting, and general DevOps. So for fun, I said, how many of these things are we doing as an organization? This is what I came up with. Mostly 3. But those are the 3 things we more or less get for free from using AWS. So that doesn't necessarily mean that what we should do is, so again, measures. The measures are not how many of these boxes can we tick. It is what can we do to improve the other things that I've laid out in that rubric. You can also include this. You can adopt or change almost anything, and it will be better than where we are now. Even if you choose technology that seems like so obvious or easy to implement that it is inevitable. But like, that doesn't mean that you can just go however you want. Like, so this is why I said I would be talking about shifting left on security a little bit later, because that's basically The basic problem is if your feedback loop does not also include how do we design these things securely, you end up with weird systems. So like you can spawn and create all kinds of crazy stuff that someone named Devin will have to fix later. And then, so we don't want to do that either. So for me, the next steps are, well, if I want to position that correctly, I'm actually going to come at it from the InfoSec perspective. So as a part of the ICU program, there's this SDLC project. SDLC is software development lifecycle. This is the document I was just talking about that goes into depth. Sort of, I took the Ruby platform, said here's sort of where we are from just is stuff supported, and then what can we do to improve these measures and practices across the whole thing. It's a fairly accessible document, I think, and it's only like 8 pages, so like go read that if you care. And then on top of that, okay, no. The one sentence summary of SDLC thing, that SDLC project is if you write software, please keep it up to date. And then what I want to do is like make that easier so that we can be more successful at that. And that's because as I'm trying to fill Brandon's shoes, like I'm walking into, I have a bunch of software that I am going to need to make changes to. It's hard for me to make changes to these dozens and dozens and dozens of things. I'm never really going to make sufficient progress to be successful. And I'm hiring, so if you want me to help like, me fix that, that would be great. Or even if you're not on my team, interested in working with you to like make stuff better. And I think I am done in half my time. So if there is anything that you want to follow up on or talk about or any questions, yes, Jim.
I know it's surprising that I have a question so early, but so I believe a lot of what you spoke about DevOps there really applies to, let's say, custom software development, because we kind of understand it in IT.
Sure.
A lot of us are managing delivered applications.
Right.
So one of the things I always struggle with is what does DevOps look like when you didn't write software? But you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
The dev is kind of like lightly there, but the ops is really heavy.
Yeah, no, I mean, this ties into a lot of the things that, let's say, Michelle's team deals with as well. So we get a wide variety of, so the phrase that gets thrown around is why am I drawing a blank now? That's because it's the buzzword.
Third-party apps?
No.
Sounds like.
No, we didn't transition charades, right? It's digital transformation, that's what it is. So that gets thrown around a lot. And what that basically means is your company actually acting or providing like it has a cloud service? Most of our vendors are not good at this. And part of the problem is it's almost easier for another company to come along and eat that first company using these new principles than to have the existing company reinvent itself so that it's actually prepared for what is currently possible. Unfortunately, we're in this situation where we have relationships with dozens or hundreds of vendors that don't really act that way that well. So you were asking, what can we do about this? Part of it is, so it gets a little easier if we can try to containerize some of that stuff, but we need to get better at that before we start playing with things that wouldn't take that well. Yes?
So I view that problem kind of in similarity to where you had your chart with all of the different things.
Yep.
And that we look at the things that we can actually control, right? So when we get a patch from a vendor, right? How do we, we start walking like, how can we continue to test? How do we test that quickly? How can we deploy that in a way that doesn't bring production down? So like you just kind of pick up along the chain where you can and try and incorporate the DevOps practices within where you get it and within the implementation you have, right? Because it's the concept is to try and be able to react to the needs of our campus quickly without and getting positive results. So like, how can we do that better and be confident that we're not introducing any abilities, that we're not going to bring anything down, we're not going to bring integrations and all that. It makes it harder, it's hard, but we have less upfront than the same attention, it's just focusing that ladder. So
Right.
that's how I do it.
Your third-party software runs on infrastructure, for the most part, SaaS, it's obviously not the case. And a lot of these things do not apply anyway. But, we can apply these principles to the infrastructure that runs the third-party software. If they expose enough capabilities that we can automate installation, base software or updates or configuration, then that's something we can turn into code as well.
I'll just also say that even though we have a lot of people that are platforms or applications that they're getting from vendor, how many people in this room have written code that got deployed in production in the last 5 to 10 years?
You count.
Right. So people are writing code all over the place, right? Is the process for deploying that code reliable? It's agile? All those things that Dan said are the things that would indicate for a high-performing organization. Other things we could do, even in those cases where I'm not writing GLEZ, right? Even though it's important that we write GLEZ, we do that well. But there's a lot of situations where the work that we do, whether it's integration software or other applications that we're writing that maybe aren't what we would consider a traditional software development. I think really kind of these practices.
Having commercial application, I would say we probably still have, I would say 1,500,000 and 500,000 lines of code that we have written that support integrations and other things that allow our application to work with everything else. So that's
I think there's like some kind of piggyback what Michelle said, like if you're managing a platform that's given you by a vendor, it doesn't mean that you can't do things like I've seen blog posts where people are taking containers and containerizing apps or whatever built to be containerized, but it can be done.
Right.
And they start to gain some benefit from being able to easily upgrade and roll back.
Yep.
By containerizing them. So I wonder if that's like an area where a team in OIT just start looking at like how do we containerize a quote unquote legacy app.
Yep.
And just get really good at
I would love to see that. And there is precedent for that, and some of our interviews for peers. Yes, James.
Just to elaborate on your question, Jim, like, we're at the point where we do have a lot of infrastructure code and stuff included for the Amazon platform. We can utilize the same streamline it, make sure we can full deal. You said the other day.
Cool.
Dan,
Yeah.
do you have a model in mind, idealized model for the next new thing that you so
Sure.
look at it, right? You have a new thing you need to
Right.
deploy. This is what you want to do.
No. Let me answer that question in the longest way I possibly can. Which is, so I'm going to open this document. Oh, it's already in this tab. Okay, so really what yeah, it would be great for me to have an ideal that I was working towards. But that's not actually where I'm going to start. I've got, in this SDLC breakdown, I've got first you stabilize, then you remediate, then you extend and sustain, and then you can get closer to, I think by that point, we'll understand closer to what we actually want. Because, yeah, I can go through and look at stuff that comes from AWS or other vendors and say, what is the best thing I could possibly come up with and try to fit things in that model. But in the change approach that I take is an incremental one, where I can say, what is the smallest step I can take that will work first and that will orient me for the next several ones. But no, I would love to have something like that. Maybe someday I'll write